So yeah, I'm talking to you today from a bit of a showery, wet and blustery British county just outside of London, and my current role is as a maritime pilot on the River Thames, as well as chairing the maritime navigation group for the RIN.
And what does your day in the life of a marine pilot look like then on the Thames estuary?
Yeah, so I'll probably best explain a bit about the Thames first. The Port of London is the UK's busiest port and also the largest port. So we have a huge area to cover, and we're actually split into sea pilots and river pilots. So there's about 120 of us total, and we do shift pattern of 9 days on and 6 days off. So when we go into the roster, we can get a phone call of a minimum of 2 hours notice. So that's time for us to, even in the middle of the night, get up, get dressed, make our passage plan, and then make our way to the pilot station. And from the pilot station, we will then either go to directly to the ship on the berth to take the ship out, or it'll be a taxi ride out to one of the pilot stations, either Ramsgate, Harwich, or Sheerness. That's an opportunity for a little taxi nap, which I definitely always take advantage of. And then yeah, then we go out on the pilot boat to board the ship and bring it into the estuary and then up to the berth. So it's very varied. No one day looks the same.
And are there any specific challenges then that you face in your maritime world, and sort of how do you overcome them?
So lots of different challenges. Probably the main one is the tides in this part of the world. We get a good tidal range of 5 or 6 meters, over 6 meters at Springs, and also the good old British weather. We get those wonderful low pressure fronts coming in off the Atlantic that can make things interesting. So. Yeah, how to overcome those? I guess the main thing with the tide is to use it. Don't try and fight against it. So we consider the tug the tide a free tug. So that's the best way to think about it. Work with the elements, and the same with the weather, really. Just trying to use it to your advantage, or knowing your limits specifically with regards to whichever berth you're going to, or with the ship itself, and having that discussion with the master. A few other challenges I've got showing up on some photos here, some pilot ladders, a not great disembarkation point on the left of your screen, and an interesting setup with a combination in the middle of the screen there. So yeah, ladders is always a tricky one. Um, we're very much as pilots at the hands of the crew and whoever's secured it at the top, and whether that's been checked suitably, and whether the design of the disembarkation point has been correctly uh, you know, created, really. So, the picture on the left, for example, someone has said to the ship, you need stanchions. But if you were embarking, you wouldn't actually be able to reach those stanchions because they're the wrong side of the railings. Um, so yes, you see some interesting things. So the important thing for us is to know the regulations and understand why they exist, and then reporting any deficiencies and educating the crew and the captain and the deck officers. Education's a key part of overcoming that particular challenge. And then the other one on the Thames is just the variety of water users there are. So in this picture, you can see a couple of cruise ships, there's a sailing vessel, there's tugs, in addition to all the other commercial traffic. So we see everything on the Thames, tankers, container ships, bulk. Um, We've got edible oil tankers, dredges, you name it, we've seen it. And obviously that changes as you go further upriver and into the city as well. So yeah, that's probably not as big a challenge as some of my colleagues, say on the south coast of the UK, who are dealing with a lot more of leisure users, but we do have a wide variety. And that's just understanding what they're doing, what their purpose is, and how they might maneuver on the river, um, and what communication channel they might be using if you need to get hold of them, is probably the challenge on the Thames.
So skills then, Ivana, what's the most important ones that you think that you need to become a marine pilot?
Yeah, I think for me, the main one is keeping calm under pressure. That's really key. And being ex-military, I sort of that's become natural to me. As a pilot, leadership, I think, is really important as well. You're leading the bridge team, but also becoming part of that team really quickly and working with the bridge crew, with the deck officers, and with the master. So you're sort of integrating yourself into that team and leading it at the same time, which is a unique challenge. And then just being a team within the port as well, speaking to the tugs, to the vessel traffic services, to other um, people using the river, be that pilots or masters. Yeah, that's really key. And then we think about actually maneuvering the ship, anticipating the conditions or how the ship's going to maneuver, planning for that, and reacting to what you actually see out the window as well is really key. And sometimes you've got to fight, really got to fight. Sometimes it's really hard to balance um, the engines with the bow thruster or balance the two tugs with the wind, and sometimes it's a real fight to maintain that, but it's always rewarding when you're safely tied up, or you safely get to the end of the pilot district.
So you mentioned your military background. Did you always want to be a pilot then?
No, so I'd always planned on joining the Royal Navy. So this photo is me just after passing out of Britannia Royal Naval College. So I've not long turned 19. And I knew I wanted a role at sea um, from the age of 14. That's when I decided that I wanted to join the Royal Navy and go to sea. The
And what
idea. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, what do you think came first then, the maritime or the navigation in that sort of that perspective?
Definitely maritime. So have absolute no shame. These are little pictures of me when I was very tiny on the St. Mawes ferry. There's me looking at a warship.
There's a
Um,
strong theme here, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've always been in or near the sea, and I've always had a passion to be on it or near it, smelling it. So yeah, I did just over 11 years in the Royal Navy, and that was time for me. And then yeah, then I became a maritime pilot. So yeah, two jobs, both very much sea themed.
And what did that training look like in the Royal Navy, the navigation training?
So it looks very much like this photo actually. So yeah, that's me just as a sub lieutenant back in 2012. Um, the way navigation works on Royal Navy ships is there are essentially far too many people on the bridge. So behind me, you can see the navigating officer there is at the Polaris, taking bearings. They've got a plan, and there is a person on every station on the bridge. So I'm sat in front of the Ecdis in this photo, or Wecdis, warship Ecdis. There will be another officer sat in front of the radar screen. You can see the officer watch there looking over the shoulder of the helmsman, but there'll be two people on the helm, one for steering and one for the engine orders and levers. There'll be someone else checking the echo sounder. There'll be an engineer available for the bridge systems. And then there will be, if the platform management system is on the bridge, there'll be a marine engineer overseeing that in case of any engine issues. And occasionally you'll have one or two more um, taking charge of, say, upper weapons crews, upper deck weapon crews, and then of course there's the captain who is sort of sitting usually in a seat next to the navigator and overseeing the whole thing. So yeah, the navigating officer will essentially be pulling in the information from all of those outstations and then checking it's what he's seen out the window, what looks right with his plan, and verifying all that information. Um, yeah, it's probably a little more complex than it needs to be. But that's the way we did it in the Royal Navy. There's obviously a lot of ship handling. Often as young officers, you end up on a patrol ship like this one, doing lots of in and out of port. There's usually a twin screw, CPP, so pitch propeller, outward turning with a bow thruster, at least one tug for berthing, and berthing aside nice Yokohama fenders. There's astronavigation when the weather permits, and yeah, there's a lot of studying of rule of the road. We do a lot of rule of the road, and we're required to learn it verbatim, so word for word in the Royal Navy up to Rule 19, and then a working knowledge of the rest of the rules and exemptions. This is a just before I became a navigation training instructor, when I was still navigating in the Navy, I would be training my own officers of the watch and my young officer cadets. And you can see how much I loved it. This is one of my examples of getting the coloured pens out and teaching them various different rules and cardinal marks, etc. Um, We also do a lot of anchoring, which is exceptionally good practice for the young officers and the officers of the watch, and the procedures there. So that's really good practice. And not just in port areas, we do it all around the UK, especially when you're doing fishery protection. And obviously, there's also quite a lot of simulator use within the Royal Navy, partly due to a disparity between the number of trainees and the number of ships available. So those were really good.
And what would you say the challenges and limitations of simulator training?
Yeah, challenges from for simulator training. Um, I actually think simulator training is really, really good. I think it's exceptionally useful for the purposes of exercises, to practice emergencies. Very often, these scenarios are all about communication and following a set procedure, which you can really easily practice in a simulator with no issues at all. And it really gives officers of the watch and navigators and the whole crew confidence in their abilities and gives them a sense of preparedness for if and when the worst does happen. So they're particularly good for things like engine breakdowns or steering gear breakdowns or what to do in the event of a man overboard or you hear a mayday on the radio. All these things can be practiced really well in a simulator.
Fab. And in the wild, then, can you talk to us a bit about the places where you've sailed and sort of, yeah, how you got there and any specifics?
Yeah, certainly. I've actually spent. Let me just bring the slideshow up to date. There we go. Yeah, I've actually spent a lot of time in and around the UK. I've actually ended up dry docking four different, or been in dry dock with four different ships, which I think is quite unusual for a lot of people. I've been out to the Red Sea quite a few times and the Persian Gulf. This is the Seychelles, so crossing the equator and then heading down to these stunning islands. and really nothing prepared me for a vast amount of ocean and then this sudden gorgeous, just lush green mound coming out of the sea. It was absolutely stunning. Um, Obviously, when you arrive anywhere from a port, you see what it's really like for the locals. It wasn't all doe-eyed honeymooners and beaches, but it was absolutely stunning. I managed to visit Mumbai as well on a different trip. I'd done the Suez Canal a few times, but I'd never managed to set foot on Africa until we needed to get some fuel on board. And this is actually Eritrea, and I was so happy, even though I was on a fuel terminal, it was still connected to the mainland. So this is me with a little label saying I'm in Africa. So I did finally step foot on that continent. Um, yeah, but
And
a lot of time around the UK as well.
so, proudest navigation moment for you to date?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think for me, it's sort of when the Royal Navy met pilotage. So this is an example of that. This is a foreign warship, but in the River Thames by the pilot station. So my first, after I qualified as an officer of the watch, my first warship was HMS Argyle. And I'd been piloting for a couple of years, and I had the opportunity to be her pilot as she was coming up into London. So just up to Gravesend, and then a river pilot took her on up into town. But that was really special for me. I hadn't didn't have a great time on the Argyle when I was newly qualified, but this was just wonderful. It was a really close-knit bridge team. The second in command, the executive officer, was a specialist navigator, so he'd done all the navigation training you could pretty much do in the Royal Navy, and I was able to show off a few techniques, and it was just really fun. So that was really quite memorable. I can't not mention the fact that I did when I was an officer cadet. I was on HMS Ark Royal for her last trip around the UK, and I took the con as a midshipman. So I was given the steering orders when we did a replenishment at sea with the RFA Orange Leaf. So this massive Royal Fleet auxiliary tanker, which we were driving just about 50 meters away from in parallel. And that was wonderful. Obviously, I had the captain right on my shoulder, but it was definitely a memorable experience. I regret there's no photos of that. Um, Taking HMS Tyne into the Tyne for the mouth of the River Tyne festival that was fun, and obviously qualifying as a marine pilot is obviously on that list as well.
I bet. And for, I mean, I'm a complete layman, Ivana, in terms of like the ship that we're seeing, the vessel that we're seeing on the picture, the context, what sort of size is that? Is that the largest vessel you've navigated, or?
No, not at all. I'd say this isn't one I actually know very well because she's not a British warship. Um, but I mean the pilot boat's just over 10 meters long. So for size, yeah, that's only about 60, 70 meters long max. Um, yeah, so I do at the moment ships of up to 175 meters length overall, and with a draft, so that's the underwater bit of up to 9.5 meters, and I'm shortly going to go up to 190 meters long. So yeah, good couple of football pitches I think that relates to.
And obvious challenges there associated with navigating something that length.
You know what? Actually, as you start going up in size, you get more powerful engines and a more powerful bow thruster, and then when you get to another certain size, you get um you get more tug assistance. So you get one or two tugs, and you can do anything you like with the ship when you've got tugs. So actually, the more challenging thing is when you've got the smaller ships, especially the very old ones, who are a bit slow, the engines are a little bit slow. You get some of these small ships that are used to going up and down the Dutch rivers. So they've got a bridge that will actually go up and down and lower, and their radar is all in kilometers. So in the UK, it's obviously or nautical miles and yards or meters. Um, so also quite a lot of the berths, especially the tanker berths in London, are built for quite large ships. So when you're a small ship going to those berths, you need to be much more precise to land on the fenders and not slip between the gap between them. So sometimes you have to be actually a lot more precise, and it's a lot more challenging with the smaller stuff.
And you touched about the sort of the camaraderie and like the team on the bridge and that side of things. Can you give us an idea of sort of age gaps of and nationalities of the crew?
Yeah, sure. So, very often we get ships coming across from Europe, often from Rotterdam and other European ports. And so I've been on board with a chief officer who couldn't get a job as a master. He'd previously been a master, but because of his age, no one would employ him as a master. So he was over 60, and he could only get chief officer jobs. At the other end of the spectrum, you see cadets who are 19, 20, who've only been at sea for a few months, and everything in between. Nationality wise, often you get European officers, masters, um, Russians, Dutch, German, Ukrainian, Swedish, and Finnish, very common. Um, and the occasional Indian master, and very often the crew is Filipino, or a mix of different countries. And it's always lovely, and it's always interesting when they offer you food on board because that's when you ask what the nationality of the chef is.
Right. So lots of nationalities then, and presumably English would be the working language. So apart from the obvious of communicate understanding each other, what are the main challenges there?
So, yeah, that really can be a challenge. So internationally at sea, the working language is English. So you'd expect everyone to have a certain level of English. Um, However, yeah, when it comes to accents, there can be real challenges. Sometimes you see a difference with ages. So sometimes an older master might struggle a little bit with English, but if you've got, say, a younger chief officer, they'll sometimes step in. And I've had that before where the captain could communicate quite well with me in English, but he wasn't understanding me very well. So I'd use the chief officer and she would explain it to him, but then she couldn't respond to me very well. So then he had to reply to me. Um, and we'd get there eventually. But as with everything, pilotage is about communication, about that teamwork with the bridge. So you're constantly passing information, verifying, understanding, and checking. So there are ways of overcoming that for sure. It's a bit more challenging when you're unberthing. So when you're taking a ship out because you've got a lot less time to get to know um, the captain and to have that conversation. Whereas it's a quite long passage in, so there's a lot more opportunity to build that relationship, have that understanding, talk through the maneuver. It's a lot easier when you're coming in because you usually get at least a couple of hours, sometimes 4, 5, 6 hours or more to really get to know the captain and the bridge team and the ship.
So you're dealing with that element whilst on board. So what happens if have you ever come down with sudden sickness? or if just before you're about to on board, what happens then?
Yeah, so I mean, it is not unusual. You can see from this photo, we were working during COVID. I think every pilot at some point has had the conversation with the captain. So I might need to dash to the loo. Are you happy with where we're currently at and what's happening? I think everyone's been through that, but yeah, you've got to know your own limits and your own body, especially when it comes to sickness or fatigue and tiring, and knowing that, is part of the job. So yeah, you just wouldn't do the job if you were very, very, very ill. And obviously we were all wearing masks during COVID, and yeah, it's not unusual now if someone's ill for there to people to wear masks, or just to distance yourself from each other on the bridge a little bit.
And you might have touched on this earlier, but in terms of your own sort of greatest navigational challenge, can you share any specifics as to what that is and what you had to do, physically to sort of overcome it?
Yeah, sure. To be really honest, it's not quite navigation, but my answer is that just becoming an officer of the watch was really, really challenging for me. I'd got my officer of the watch ticket, and it was hard. And when I joined my first ship, I wasn't supported and encouraged in a way that allowed me to flourish and fulfill my potential. I remember being given contradictory orders by two people senior to me, two of my line managers, and just not knowing what to do. Um, and yeah, they were telling me things like I had no situational awareness, I had no command presence, um, and yeah, it'd be interesting if they could see me now, because
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I'm using all of those skills every day, and it's part of my job, and I love it.
So, what would you tell your younger self then, as a young officer of the watch, or what advice would you sort of want to pass on to others?
Yeah, I would say don't give up. You're not the problem. I definitely tell myself, my younger self, that, and just keep striving and keep learning, and do the best for yourself. And yeah, I was probably really quite naive when I first went to sea, so I would encourage everyone to advocate for themselves. If something doesn't feel right, or you don't feel like you're getting enough support, and then ask for it. Especially if you're a cadet on board, and you're not getting the training that you need, ask for it, demand it. That's what you're there for. You're there to learn, and you should be provided with those opportunities.
And in terms of a career as a pilot, what's your advice for those contemplating a career as a pilot? What are the sort of steps or advice that you'd share?
It's a great question. So, I would say get on as many ships as possible. Get on a variety of ships. See how they handle dredgers. You can see this is a dredger here. They're really great for ship handling experience out in the open water. If you can, watch the captain come alongside. Ask if you can give it a go. Practice using tugs, because that is really great, and talk to the tug masters. And if you can get on board a tug, like in this picture, you get a really good oversight of the communication between the master or the pilot and the tug master, and it just gives you a really unique perspective of maneuvering on and off the berth. So yeah, just get as much experience as you can.
And you've mentioned berthing and unberthing. What's the sort of one rule of thumb every navigator should know?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question again. So I would say work with the elements when you can. As I mentioned about the tide earlier, every pilot you'll speak to will always say keep the speed low. You know, new speed is good, old speed is bad. You're always watching the speed, and communication. Communication is always key, as so is the coffee.
what did you have to do to convert your STCW brackets MOD to STCW for merchant ships?
So this varies around the country and around the world as well. So I did qualify in the Royal Navy as a small ship captain. So I had my we call it CQ1. So I did have that. And I had various other tickets which would equate to a Master Mariner's ticket, like my GMDSS, COC, etc. So I didn't have to convert it as such, and there are ports around the country which will accept a Royal Navy qualification. Obviously, I was very fortunate having come straight across from being a navigation instructor, having actually been hands-on with the ship handling. Um, and I also had the opportunity to spend a week with Medway pilots who actually share some of the Port of London district. So I had a week with them, just seeing what it was all about, and I was had a recommendation from them. So just seeing what it was all about was really helpful, and obviously helped me tailor my CV as well. But yeah, do feel free to get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to chat more about that.
Ivana, this has been a fascinating journey. I've really enjoyed it. I liked your emphasis on the fact it's about this relationship between you, particularly you and the master, and how you read almost the body language, the coffee language, and that gives you more than perhaps any document scanners to feel of how the ship was going to respond and how it works. But you must see some great highs and lows in the experiences of and the ability, shall we say, to use natural navigation or glued to the screen of both the master and the officer of the watch. Is there a huge variation there?
There is absolutely a huge variation, and we still get some ships coming in with paper charts. Although they've usually got a laptop somewhere on the bridge with their little label saying not to be used for navigation. Yeah, so varying degrees of ship systems, varying degrees of training. Interesting for me is whenever we have poor visibility and seeing whether the captain automatically starts supplementing the bridge team and making sure there are extra lookouts and dimming the lights on the bridge, etc., or whether I need to be the one to take charge of that. But again, the Thames estuary is very complex and there are many different routes in, and there are
Mhm.
regulations regarding which route you can use depending on the
Yeah.
size of your ship. So, very often, I need to advise and direct the captains heading, especially if I'm getting off early, if it's a smaller ship. So we only need to be with them for half the district, and
Okay.
then making sure they're not going via the big ship route or the deep water route, and just giving them some guidance on exactly, where their route should be taking them, and what they can expect
Yeah.
along that route is really key. Yeah,
Okay. And can I come up with a supplementary, if I may, which
of
is
course,
that
James.
um, in the future, in my work with the IMO, we're looking at unmanned shipping under the mass concept. How do you, Ivana, as an experienced pilot and experienced navigator, how do you see the whole business of ship handling, berthing, pilotage for unmanned shipping? Do pilotage and unmanned shipping, do they fit together? How do we make that bit of the jigsaw all fit?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. I think the technology's got a long way to go yet.
Yeah.
I've been involved with. We're very fortunate to have our own hydrographics team at the Port of London, our own hydrographics department, and they're regularly updating not just the depths along the around the Thames and at the berths, but also looking at the tidal stream data and
Yeah.
tidal stream modelling. And there just isn't a model for tidal stream that is
No.
absolutely perfect, that will take into account the difference between springs and neaps that will show you the difference within the water column or what will
Yeah.
change when we've had a heavy rainfall
Yeah.
further upriver. So and it's the same for the wind. You know, we get a lot of gusts in the UK, and
Yeah.
I just I don't think they're certainly not at the moment. There is no technology that can be reactive enough to adapt to something that's different to a model. So at the moment, the human expertise and experience and ability to respond is so much better than any technology.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how you share experiences with other pilots? Because it seems to me it's very much a one-person job. And how do you communicate amongst the rest of the team and lessons learnt?
Thank you, Barry. That's a really good question. So, we've got different classes of pilots. So, you start off as a trainee and then move up once you're qualified to a class 4 pilot. And that just restricts you on your size of ship. And then you progress up to a class 1 and class 1 Havens pilots doing the 400-meter long 2-pilot job ships. So, as you go through the classes and you go through roughly qualifying about once a year, you do trips with other pilots more senior to you on slightly larger ships, so you practice with them. We've got our own simulator, so we do a lot of simulator time, and we get together and have regular meetings with the tugs and the tug masters and crews. So there's lots of opportunities to share information and processes and look at how other people do it. There's also we've got a bridge resource management course, and we've got a MPX, a master pilot exchange course. So again, opportunities to share information, and we specifically look at accidents and scenarios both locally and around the world, and have a look at what went wrong, get into the investigation and learn from those errors. And we've also got our own systems in place whenever there's issues with certain ships or near misses. And we do have a way of sharing the facts of those as well. So yeah, there is lots of opportunity to share and to learn from one another.